So let us look at this year's paper 2, Polity, Governance, Social Issues and International Relations. So like what we have done for essay paper and ethics paper, first let us see what are the observations that we can make from this paper. What are the trends that we can recognize? First of all, there are no questions from what we call current events. Not even a single question is there from current events. Zero questions from current events. Second, emphasis is more on governance. All the time, as we keep on saying, UPSC is moving towards governance. Third, questions from polity are mostly related to constitution. Questions from polity are mostly related to the traditional aspects of a constitution. And from IR, the focus is on analysis. Focus is on analysis. So this is what we can see. Obviously, this year, those who prepared for this paper from say current affairs perspective, all of them, it was a major shock for all of them. All of them went into depression also. And half of them could not understand the questions. Remaining half, they felt bad because they understood the questions, because they could not write answers to them. So obviously, this paper, if you look at the past trends, obviously it will require conceptual knowledge, as we keep on saying, about the constitution, functioning of our governance systems and analytical aspects of our social issues. That is what UPSC is looking at. And of course, another thing that we can say is that paper is very lengthy. It becomes difficult to complete the entire question paper. On the positive side, if you are thorough with your fundamentals, you can answer all the 20 questions. There is not even a single question which you cannot answer. You can answer all the questions. Let us look at all the questions one by one. Do you think that the Constitution of India does not accept the principle of strict separation of powers, rather it is based on the principle of checks and balances? Explain. So this is what we always say about the Constitution of India. Even in our classes also, that is what we said. We have a separation of functions but not a separation of powers. Separation of functions between the three organs of the state. Legislature is responsible for law making, executive for implementation, and judiciary for interpretation. Our constitution has only separation of functions but not of powers. Why? Why? Because we have opted for parliamentary democracy. In parliamentary democracy, executive is a part of legislature. Executive is part of legislature. And in theory, we say that legislature is expected to control executive, but in reality, it is the executive that controls legislature through majority on the floor of the house. And the essence of our constitution, as we say, is again what we have discussed in the class. The entire constitution can be described in one single word: constitutionalism. That is what we always say. Constitutionalism means ensuring inherent checks and balances within the system. On the other hand, if you look at the constitutions of UK or United States of America, in United States of America you have a proper separation of powers between legislature, executive and judiciary. In United States of America, the president is not a part of legislature. On the other hand, in United Kingdom, Parliament is supreme as well as sovereign. Because they don't have any written constitution. Whereas when we talk about India, the entire thing is based on constitutionalism. Our constitutional forefathers did not give importance to strict separation of powers. Obviously, this is not possible in parliamentary democracy. That is the reason why they focus more on what is called proper checks and balances within the system. Executive, legislature can control executive. There are so many instruments of legislature control over executive. Judiciary can control both legislature and executive. Executive can influence the functioning of judiciary. Inherent checks and balances. What is the principle behind this? Constitution is supreme and sovereign, whereas the organs of the state are supreme in their domain, but they are not sovereign. And there are inherent checks and balances. That is what we say the essence of democracy is all about, in ensuring checks and balances within the system. That is the reason why we say that our constitutional scheme of things is far better than what UK has or what USA has also. You can see recently in United Kingdom, they are wishing that they also have a democracy like India. That is what they are, why? Because the Prime Minister has suspended the Parliament. Now Supreme Court had come to the rescue of Parliament. That is what we call checks and balances. Inherent checks and balances. That is the reason why we say that in our constitutional democracy, it is not possible for any organ of the state to become a dictator. Unless, of course, you are Narendra Modi. That's a different thing. So, otherwise, it is not possible for any of the organs of the state to become a dictator. Because it is based on the principle of constitutionalism, which is essentially means checks and balances. So, that is the reason why our constitutional forefathers were not that much interested in the strict separation of powers. They only opted for separation of functions with the focus more on checks and balances. That is what you have to write for this question. Second, Central Administrative Tribunal, which was established for redressal of grievances and complaints or against central government employees, nowadays is exercising its powers as an independent judicial authority. Explain. Again, as I said, these are all questions which are mostly administrative questions. UPSC is focusing more on, strictly on what you call public administration only in polity governance paper also. So these are the things which you can expect in public administration. If they are not coming in public administration, you can be surprised. And if they are coming in polity governance, you will be depressed. Because normally in polity governance, nobody reads these kind of questions. That is the reason why, as I said that in polity governance, the most important study material is 10th report of second ERC, personal administration. Very, very important. The other day when we discussed ethics paper, almost 90% of the questions in ethics paper we answered only from the 10th report. Even in polity governance also, this paper also, we will answer most of the questions from that paper. So, from that report. So, what is this Central Administrative Tribunal? Article 323, this is what we study in public administration. Article 323A of our Constitution, it has provisions for establishing administrative tribunals to address the grievances of government employees. What are the grievances of government employees? It is regarding transfers, promotions, suspensions, and postings. And why these administrative tribunals are required? Why? Because the present judiciary in India is overburdened institution. Judiciary is highly overburdened institution. And if judiciary has to take up all these cases also, it results in more burden on the part of judiciary. Second, judicial process is highly time consuming because judiciary has to follow what we call a due process of law. It is highly time consuming. Third, judiciary does not have experience or expertise to deal with these kind of cases. Judiciary can look into legal aspects but not into governance or administrative aspects. That is the reason why our constitution has provided for administrative tribunals. And these administrative tribunals, they had come into existence in 1985 in a Central Administrative Tribunal. What is the mandate of Central Administrative Tribunal? As I said, it is part of what we call alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. This is what we said about the tribunals also. And this Central Administrative Tribunal consists of equal members from bureaucracy as well as judiciary to have both administrative and legal assistance. And it deals with all the problems related to, central government employees. As I said, the problems related to transfer, promotions, postings and everything else, grievances. As we discussed in ethics paper also, politicization of civil services. That is where these tribunals come to the rescue of these bureaucrats, honest bureaucrats. These honest bureaucrats are made to suffer by political executive in the form of transfers and stopping their promotions and suspending them unfairly, so on and so forth. They provide grievance redressal mechanism. Next, these tribunals do not follow the procedure of ordinary courts. This is what we say about all tribunals also. They have their own procedures and they have a lot of flexibility in their functioning also. Next, the judgments of these tribunals are considered final. Pardon? That's what we are saying. You're nanosecond fast. Okay. These judgments are final, but there is a provision that they can be challenged in Supreme Court. Later, Supreme Court came out with a judgment saying that under Articles 226 and 227, they can be challenged in high courts also. What are Article 226? Writ petitions. They can be challenged in high courts also. Normally, judiciary will not take up the cases because otherwise it will become a trend also. Every judgment will be challenged in a court of law, reducing tribunals to ineffective institutions. That is the reason why judiciary exercises utmost caution while accepting the cases from tribunals. That is the reason why we say that the judgments of tribunals are treated as final. But as I said, in recent times, these tribunals also had come under severe stress because of the tendency of the government to take away the independence of these tribunals by appointing its favorite bureaucrats to these tribunals. The same thing we study about all regulatory authorities, you are talking about the same for these tribunals also. And mostly the judgments given by the tribunals, it is said that are favoring the government only, not the employees. And also the judgments given by tribunals are favoring higher level bureaucracy against lower level bureaucracy. That is the reason why second ERC in its report on personal administration has suggested reforms in the functioning of these tribunals, saying that they must have transparency, accountability in their functioning. And there must be credibility of these tribunals because the appointment of members to these tribunals should be done in a fair, transparent manner. And obviously, as we said, that they also perform judicial functions. They will investigate the cases and come out with judgments. This is what you have to write for this question. Next, pardon? And independent, yeah, obviously they are independent. That is what I said. These tribunals, are a specialized judicial institutions set up to look into the grievances of central government authorities. And under this, this Article 323, the judgments are final. They are functioning as independent. Judiciary will not interfere. That is what we said. Judiciary, Supreme Court cannot interfere in their functioning. Supreme Court cannot dictate the procedure to be followed by them. Supreme Court cannot dictate the judgments of these tribunals. They can function as independent silos. That is what we said. Alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, ADRs. Next, what are the methods used by the farmers' organizations to influence the policy makers in India, and how effective are these methods? So what are this is part of pressure groups. Again, if you remember, this is what we studied as part of pressure groups. In India, this farmers' lobby is one of the most powerful pressure groups. What are the methods used by farmers' organizations to influence policy makers? What are the methods used by them? Why this question was asked? In the last few years, you have seen farmers' organizations organizing huge amount of protests. Even very recently also, in Noida, all these farmers from UP, they wanted to come to Delhi and protest. Sometime back, the same thing happened in Bombay. Sometime back last year in Mumbai or Bombay, the farmers of Maharashtra had completely halted the entire functioning of Mumbai city by sitting on the roads. They occupied all the flyovers. So what are the farmers, what are the instruments they are using? They use all kinds of instruments. That is what we study in pressure groups. First, they ensure that people who are sympathetic to their problems are elected to houses of legislature. People who are sympathetic to their problems are elected to houses of legislature. That is parliament or state assemblies. Second, the second instrument used by them is through protests, public protests, by organizing hartals, bandhs and rallies. They use this method also. Third, they also use their what we call them as a powerful pressure group in terms of deciding electoral outcomes. Not only they will they will elect their own people, in other constituencies also they will put huge amount of pressure on all the candidates, acting as a powerful pressure group. Because that is what they say, that give us subsidies, otherwise we will not vote for you. Give us loan waivers, otherwise we will not vote for you. Next, in recent times, unfortunately, recent times, they are also committing suicides, to bring to the notice of people, their problems. Unfortunate phenomena in recent times. So they are using all these instruments. And then the question says that how effective are these methods? Definitely these methods are effective, but unfortunately these methods are only benefiting rich and powerful farmers. They are benefiting only what you call feudal landlords. Average Indian farmer, he is not able to benefit out of these methods. Why? Because with these methods, what are the policies that the government is coming out? The government is coming out with policies like doubling MSP, increasing MSP. But the problem is that average Indian farmer is a net buyer of food grains. Out of only 6% of farmers benefit out of MSP. And the regional variation also is very much there. And recently the government had also come out with giving more subsidies. But again, most of these subsidies are going to, they are going to, again, rich and powerful farmers. Poor farmers are not benefiting out of it. And recently the government had come out with, in some of the states, loan waivers. At the central level, the government also had come out with Kisan scheme, providing cash support, money support to farmers. This is what. Are these measures are effective? As we have said, they provide temporary relief to the problems faced by the farmers. Tomorrow we will discuss again all these things as part of economy, agriculture. So all these measures are providing only temporary relief to them. It is not able to solve their the structural problems faced by Indian farmers. And it is mostly benefiting, like any other reform, benefiting undeserving sections of society. Rich and powerful landlords are benefiting out of these measures. That is what you have to write. Next, from the resolution of contentious issues regarding distribution of legislative powers by the courts, principles of federal supremacy and harmonious construction have emerged. So, again, we talk about constitutionalism. What we are saying here, India has opted for a federal form of government. At the time of independence, we have opted for federal form of government, wherein we have a vertical division of powers between the union and the state governments. Vertical division of powers between the union and state governments. That is the reason why we have union list, state list, and concurrent list. And what is the principle behind this distribution of powers? What is the principle behind the distribution of these powers? We call it as the principle of subsidiarity principle. And what is the subsidiarity principle? Those functions which can be performed best at the lowest level should be performed at the lowest level. Those functions which cannot be performed by the lower level governments should be transferred to the higher level governments. But our constitutional forefathers, apart from this following this subsidiarity principles, they also opted for a constitution which is highly skewed in favor of union government. In legislative relations, the relations are highly skewed in favor of union government. That resulted in continuous conflicts between the union and the state governments, especially during the phase of confrontational federalism between 1967 and 1990. What are the reasons for confrontation here? The tendency of the union government to make laws on items in the state list, and tendency of the union government to take items from the state list and move it towards union and concurrent lists. And one of the important features of constitutionalism, we always say, is that two things: independent judiciary and judicial review. As part of this, we have an independent judiciary, Supreme Court. The original jurisdiction of Supreme Court includes resolving the disputes between the federal governments, between the union and state governments. And the question says, what are the principles followed by Supreme Court while resolving the disputes between the union and state governments? It says that the principles of first one is principle of federal supremacy, second one is harmonious construction. What is this principle of federal supremacy? What is the principle of federal supremacy? What does it talk about? Yes, in a union government, in all the items in its union list, union government has a complete sovereignty to make legislation for items in the union list. At the same time, state governments have a complete sovereignty to make legislations for items in the state list. You must respect this supremacy of each of these federal units. That is what the first principle. Otherwise, federalism cannot survive. Already our constitution is highly unitary in nature. If you are not giving powers to the state governments to make legislations on items in the state list also, there is no point in having federal form of democracy. That is the reason why Supreme Court always starts with this principle. Second one is harmonious construction. What is harmonious construction? When you talk about harmonious construction, if you look at the articles related to the Constitution, if you read those articles independently, they look as if they are contradicting one another. And harmonious construction basically emphasizes on the fact that the articles of the Constitution should be read together, not in an independent manner, from the point of view of the Constitution, not from the point of view of what is being written in the articles. For example, if you look at our Constitution, if you look at the articles 249, 250, 251, 252, 253, all these articles give powers to the union government to legislate on items in the state list under exceptional circumstances. So, when the Supreme Court take up all these matters, Supreme Court looks at these articles and they look at the changes made by the union government to laws, rules and regulations from the point of view of these articles. Whether, on the one hand, is it protecting the supremacy of the state governments, on the other hand, it is ensuring national integration also. If you read them independently, it can be conflicting in nature, because, if you read them independently, the central government should not interfere in the functioning of the state governments. Central government should give complete freedom to the state governments, in terms of making laws, for items in the state list. But from the perspective of the nation as a whole, from the perspective of unity and integrity of the nation, from the perspective of efficiency of administration, central government can always have the power to make legislation for items in the state list also. All these centrally sponsored schemes, whether it is, for example, right to education, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, it is basically for items education is part of. Yes, like this, education is a state list or concurrent legislation. Yes, every some of the state governments have similar acts earlier, but when the central government comes out with its own legislation, obviously the central legislation will prevail over all other legislations also. So similarly, that is what the judiciary will look at. Judiciary, when it interprets the constitution, it takes into consideration these two important principles to ensure what we call collaborative federalism. On the one hand, it protects the interests of the state governments. On the other hand, it will also ensure unity and integrity of the nation also. For example, if you look at recently Parliament, this removed Article 370. Obviously, when judiciary looks tomorrow, and when judiciary will take up this matter, it will look at both from the independence of the state governments as well as from the point of view of unity and integrity of the nation, and finally it will take the decision accordingly. That is what we say, harmonious construction. Next, what can France learn from Indian Constitution's approach to secularism? This is what even before the mains also, when I conduct the exam, I said that this year definitely India-France comparison will come definitely. As part of comparison of constitutions, we have different constitutions. Normally, you study about India, USA, UK, and then Japan and France. These are only the 5 countries' constitution which you will study. Why this question was asked? Why? Because of again the events that had taken place in the recent past. The Indian concept of secularism is completely different from the Western concept of secularism. Western concept of secularism is an idea that was the product of what we call a Renaissance movement. This Western concept of secularism was also the outcome of what we call ending the dominance of the Catholic Church over the affairs of the state. That is the reason why in the Western concept of secularism, state does not recognize religion at all. Secular means state does not recognize religion at all. It also does not recognize the customs and the traditions of religions. Rule of law is supreme. Rule of law is supreme there. The laws are completely secular in nature. That means every person has to follow the law irrespective of his religious belief, traditions, customs and everything else. The government will not take into consideration your what we call religious freedoms. It will frame laws only on the basis of what is needed from the people from a macro perspective, without looking into the sectional interests of people. Whereas Indian concept of secularism is not a product of any revolution or any movement. Indian concept of secularism is the product of its own civilization, thousands of years of civilization. What is Indian concept of secularism? And I respect all religions, respect for traditions and customs of the religions, and treat every religion equally. That is why, as we study in your culture part also, why Indian civilization survived for 5,000 years, or specific Hindu civilization, for the simple reason that it is highly open, inclusive and tolerant in nature. That is why it has survived. The same thing has been included in our constitution also, in articles 25 to 29, which talk about the religious and cultural freedoms of citizens. The state respects the freedoms of citizens. The state respects the cultural traditions of citizens, and the state recognizes religion and it treats religion equally. All religions are treated equally. All of them are treated equally. State does not discriminate against religions, but there is what is called positive discrimination. State takes measures to protect and promote the interests of minority religions. Minority religions. That is what. Now, why we are talking about this? Because in France, in recent times, the French government had taken 2 important measures. First one is it has banned Muslim women from wearing burqa. It said that it cannot be done for security reasons. because if you are wearing burqa or this veil, you don't know who is there inside. So from security purposes, France has said that they are not allowed to wear burqas. Similarly, Sikhs in France were not allowed to wear turbans also. The government has said that nobody should be wearing turban. This was banned by the French government. Why? Because as I said that the government does not recognize religion. It does not have any respect for traditions and customs. That is what. Whereas in India, if you look at, the government recognizes. That is the reason why we have, a criminal procedure code which is the same for everyone, but we do not have uniform civil code because the government recognizes the diversity. That is what you have to write for this question. Next, despite consistent experience of high growth, India still goes with the lowest indicators of human development. Examine the issues that make balanced and inclusive development elusive. Please remember, the same question was asked in your economy for 15 marks, Indian economy section B. The same questions will be repeated. Only thing is that the orientation will be different. The core of the answer will remain the same. So, what we are saying is that on the one hand, India has experienced very high growth rates. Between 2003 and 2011, during this period, India experienced almost 9% growth rate, which is more than sufficient, for a country like India to realize the objectives of inclusive growth. But as the question says, on the one hand, we have a huge amount of increase in GDP, but it did not result in improvement in HDI. Human Development Index. Any of these social indicators, India's performance is going from bad to worse. Why? That is what the question says. Examine the issues that make balanced and inclusive development elusive. Why balanced and inclusive growth has remained a dream in India? What are the challenges? Why? When can you have balanced and inclusive growth? What are the different dimensions? As I said, tomorrow also we will be discussing the same thing. Why? Because first of all, this balanced and inclusive growth is possible only when you develop agriculture sector. Agriculture, almost 50% of our population still depend on agriculture for their survival, and agriculture is completely left out of this process of globalization and liberalization. Why? Because agriculture is not industry. Like industrial sector which receives huge amount of incentives from the government, agriculture never has that kind of opportunity. Since agriculture is not being developed by the government, obviously it has not resulted in inclusive growth. 50% of our population. Second, the most important reason, as we discussed yesterday as part of essay topic also, since independence, even after liberalization, we have deliberately and consciously ignored social infrastructure. We did not spend enough money on either health or education. These two sectors have been completely, you can say, criminally neglected by successive governments. It was criminal negligence on the part of successive governments. Why? Because, as we keep on saying, elections in India are always fought on, at best, food. Beyond that, nothing else. Neither the government nor the people have recognized the importance of education and health. And that is the reason why this whole period of high growth had only witnessed what we call jobless growth. Third reason, it had witnessed jobless growth. Obviously, jobless growth means you are adding a huge army of unemployed people every year to the economic system, which in no way can ensure inclusive growth. Next reason why we could not achieve Next important reason is the government only focused on subsidies to remove poverty. As we keep on saying again, that is what we study as part of governance. Poverty removal in India is restricted only to poverty alleviation. Poverty removal in India is restricted to only poverty alleviation. That means providing temporary relief from poverty to the people by providing subsidies. The government never really bothered to remove poverty permanently. That is the reason why we could not. Next reason why, huge amount of regional imbalances in terms of growth and development. Globalization and liberalization has only benefited those states which are already rich, where there is already developed infrastructure. That is what we say. The development process has created islands of prosperity in an ocean of poverty. Very few regions of the country have been developed at the cost of the rest of the country. That is the reason why, again, we could not ensure inclusive and equitable growth. Sixth reason, we have completely ignored social development. That is, development of weaker sections of society, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs, minorities, and women. We have not ensured social equity. I think this is more than enough. And then, as part of conclusion, you have to say that multidimensional development is required. Next, again, the next question is also the same. You can say that please refer to my previous answer. Give me marks also. God bless you. Okay. The worst thing is that when we discuss other questions, 15, 16, and 17, you have to write the same answer, including spelling mistakes also, to maintain consistency. So that is what the same question again. There is a growing divergence in the relation between poverty and hunger in India. The shrinking of social expenditure by the government is forcing the poor to spend more on non-food essential items, squeezing their food budgets. Elucidate. So, what is it saying? Normally we say that poverty and hunger, both of them go together. There is positive correlation between poverty and hunger. Now, what the question says is that there is growing divergence in the relationship between poverty and hunger in India. So what is happening is that the government in the last few years is spending less on social expenditure, social sector expenditure. What is social sector expenditure we are talking about here? Health, education, housing, labor, on labor reforms and minimum wages. This is what we call, then you talk about pensions. All this is what we call social expenditure. Social sector expenditure, pensions, providing insurance, pensions, old age pension, pension for unemployed people, all these things, giving, and then minimum wages. What is happening is that in the last few years, in the budgets of the government, if you look at the union budgets, in the last 10 years or so, social sector expenditure has remained stagnant in monetary terms and has declined in real terms. Social sector expenditure, it has remained either stagnant or declined in real terms. And not only this, more importantly, this outlay is not transformed into outcomes. These outlays are not transformed into outcomes. So government is spending money on health and education and housing, all these things. But the quality of services provided by the government are so poor that these poor people have no option but to approach private sector for these services. That is the reason why you can see in villages, even poorest of the poor people also want to send their children to private schools. Why? Because the standard of government schools is so bad. Similarly, they don't want to go to primary healthcare centers. Fortunately, they are not there also. If they go there, you know what happens. Okay, that is the reason why they are opting for private medicine, which is extremely costly. Since there is no pension, they have to save money for future also. That is what is happening. So what is happening here is that you are a poor person, already your sources of income are so meager, and you are spending all your income on what is called non-food expenditure. Non-food expenditure means these things. You are spending your income on non-food expenditure because housing for all is still a dream. The government says that keep on revising the targets, housing for all by 2022. Then they will say that 3022. Okay, so that is what. So that is the reason why poor people have to spend huge amount of money on basic amenities of life, because the social sector insurance has come down drastically in the last few years. That is where the problem is. Since they are spending a lot of money on this non-food expenditure, the amount of money they are spending on food is coming down. So what is happening here? On the one hand, their incomes are rising. Definitely their incomes are rising. But on the other hand, they are facing the severe problem of hunger. Why? Because they are forced to spend huge amounts of money on non-essential items, non-food expenditure. That is what the question says. Because they want a better standard of life for their children. That is the reason why they are sending them to private schools. And obviously it results in cut in their food expenditure also. That is the reason why children in India, that is what this United Nations reports talk about, malnourishment. Every one child out of two is malnourished in India. 50% of children are malnourished. Why? Simply because the paradox here, there is increase in the incomes of poor people, but due to increase in their non-food expenditure, they are not able to spend enough money on providing nutritious food to their children. That is what the question, that is what this says. Divergence in the relation between poverty and hunger. Poverty is coming down. At present, according to the recent Niti Aayog report, only 22% of people are living below poverty line. Right? Only 22%. And if you go by the latest report, it says that only 6% of people are living below poverty line, if you go by the Government of India reports. But what is the reason why this hunger remains a major issue in India? People are not having access to quality food, nutritious food. Why? Because this is the reason. That is what you have to write. And what is the solution? After writing all these things, you have to talk about solution also. What is the solution? What is the solution? The government first, focus more on increasing outlays on social sector. Second, most importantly, it must ensure that outlays are transformed into outcomes. Implementation, focus more on implementation by reducing corruption and wastage of resources. Next question. The time has come for India and Japan to build a strong contemporary relationship Okay, one more question is there in between. Eighth, implementation of ICT based projects and programs usually suffers in terms of certain vital factors. Identify those factors and suggest measures for their effective implementation. Basically, e-governance. Why e-governance has been a failure in India? Very straightforward question. What are the reasons why e-governance has been a failure in India? It will be like repeating whatever we have done in the classes. Why it has been a failure in India? Absence of proper physical infrastructure. One is electricity, bandwidth. Second, as we have said, e-governance resulted in, e-governance is antithesis to good governance. Good governance talks about inclusiveness. E-governance resulted in exclusion. It has divided the society into those who have and those who do not have access. Haves and have-nots. Those who have access to e-governance and those who do not have access to e-governance. It has benefited only people from urban middle class sections of society who can make use of ICT, and poorer sections of society could not benefit out of it. Next, another reason why e-governance has been a failure. The government followed what is called top-down approach to implementation of e-governance. It did not really elicit the support of all sections. What the government should have done, bottom-up approach. Next reason why e-governance has been a failure, as the question that was asked in section B, lack of awareness among people. Lack of awareness among people. Next reason why we say that e-governance has been a failure. The government did not involve private sector. Most of the e-governance initiatives are in a bureaucracy, government initiatives. It should have been implemented as part of PPP, public-private partnerships. And then next reason why these programs and projects suffer, as we say all the time, the government never really defined the objectives of e-governance. What it wants to achieve through e-governance. When the government does not define the objectives, how can you evaluate the performance also? Since the government did not define objectives, the government cannot evaluate the performance of these projects also. That is why we say that it has been a failure. Then after writing all these problems, you can come out with solutions also. Next, the time has come for India and Japan to build a strong contemporary relationship, one involving global and strategic partnership, but that will have a great significance for Asia and the world as a whole. The question is, the time has come. Time already came 15 days back, because I gave the same question in my test series also. I said that India-Japan relationship 100% is here. If you want, I can write it on a stamp paper and give it to you. Because the time has come at that point of time itself. So, as I keep on saying, whether you like it or not, preparation for UPSC examination cannot be for more than 8 months. Anything beyond that, it is criminal. Because international relations, if you look at, they are asking 4 questions. 2 questions you can easily predict because they are related to India and its relationship with other countries around the world. Every year they go for rotation. 1 year India-China relationship, next Indo-Russian relationship, then Indo-Pakistan, Indo-Bangladesh, Indo-Myanmar, all these things. And the remaining 2 questions related to global organizations, whether it is United Nations, IMF, World Bank, or other multilateral institutions. Every year they have to ask, how many days for preparation you require? 2 days for international relations. 2 days also, only 2 hours in a day. Because people come and ask me very weird questions. How many books should we read for IR? IR and books. What is there to read? What kind of books you have to read? If you are reading newspapers regularly, that is more than enough, nothing else. If you are reading newspapers, nothing else. First, nothing else. And every day you have a lot of free time. In that free time, read for half an hour newspapers and just go through this foreign page in newspapers, international relations page. And every day, not much of news will be there. read once in a month. And if you read a newspaper once in a month, you will know what happened in the rest of the month also. So in 1 year, you are reading 12 newspapers. It will not take more than 2 hours. That is more than enough. Okay. Whether you like it or not, this is the case. On the other hand, if you say that I want to do PhD in Indo-Nepal relationships, you can do it. With reading 250 pages about Indo-Nepal relationship, right from the Harappan times. It is very easy. Again, as I said, Indo-Japan relationships. Basically you have to answer this. There is not much to answer in these kind of questions, all completely factual questions. You have to talk about Indo-Japan relationship right from the days of independence. And in between we had some problems in Indo-Japan relationships, wherein Japan has not has debarred India from getting nuclear material. We don't have this uranium and other U-235 and other things which are needed for our nuclear reactors. Japan has those things, but Japanese constitution prohibits providing any kind of assistance to countries which are indulging in nuclear tests and other things. That is when the relationship went a little bit slow. But that was the period, 1990s also, India started this policy called low-cost policy. So as part of that, we started focusing on improving our trade relationship with Japan. And this was also the period when Southeast Asian countries were facing a severe economic crisis. India could see opportunity there for us in those economic crises by improving its trade relationship with the Southeast Asian countries, mostly Japan. And Japan later recognized the fact that India can be a safety valve for Japan against Chinese aggression in Asian continent. That is the reason why this term Asia Pacific in recent times has been changed to Indo-Pacific, talking about the growing relationship between India and Japan. Now when you talk about relationship between India and Japan, you are talking about not only bilateral relationship but also from multilateral perspective, also from the global point of view also. China is aggressively pursuing its policy of a string of pearls, wherein it is trying to have its presence in the entire Asian continent as well as the rest of the world, and the Belt and Road Initiative also. So these are the things which is creating a lot of fear in the countries around the world, especially in Asian countries, about the imperial designs of China. That is where India and Japan recognize that their relationship can be mutually reinforcing. It will benefit both the countries. It will also make Asian subcontinent much more peaceful by with India providing counterbalancing power to Chinese aggression. Not only that, that is the reason why India and Japan have also joined hands with the United States of America. They conducted what we call joint military exercises also, to show to China that we are not alone. It is international relations are all about symbolism, and these are the things which really, that is the reason why when we are talking about when Narendra Modi he became the Prime Minister, he has changed look east into act east policy. Again we identified Japan. The relation with Japan, it was started during the tenure of Manmohan Singh, when he was the Prime Minister. He visited Japan, and Japanese Premier also came to India. And after that, when Modi became the Prime Minister, he had given special emphasis to Japan, because Japan was one of the countries which reacted positively to Narendra Modi when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. So he could remember all his friends. So that is the reason why he gave more importance to don't write these things. That is the reason why he gave more emphasis to Indo-Japan relationship. And at this point of time, it is not only restricted to trade, it is also related to infrastructure. Whether it is this bullet train. More importantly, Japan has come forward to construct roads in Northeast. China is strongly objecting to it, and we are feeling extremely happy, because it is serving two purposes. One is Japan will help us in improving infrastructure in Northeast, It will also keep China on alert all the time. China knows that now India and Japan are strategic partners in development. All those things you have to write. That is why great significance for Asia and the world as a whole. Japan recognized the fact that India is a responsible nuclear power. That is the reason why Japan is strongly advocating that India should be made a member of NSG, Nuclear Supplies Group. Japan has also agreed to share nuclear technology with India, a major achievement for Narendra Modi government. All these things, as I said, if you are reading newspapers, you will come to know all these things. Only thing that you have to read from newspapers is, especially for international relations, just go through the articles of Raja Mohan in Indian Express, nothing else. Every day. He does not write every day because he is not preparing for UPSC. He has a lot of work to do also. Whenever some significant event is there, he will always write. Pardon? He writes always on Tuesday. Okay, fine. He writes on Tuesdays. Sometimes he writes on other days also when it is important. Okay. So, he writes and just go through his articles. That is more than enough for your IR. Next question. Too little cash, too much politics, leave UNESCO fighting for life. Discuss the statement in the light of US withdrawal and its accusations of the cultural body as being anti-Israel bias. UPSC is 1 year late because last year I gave the same question in our test series. Sometimes UPSC is prompt, sometimes they are late, little bit late. Why? Because last year, that is before last year in 2017, United States of America had taken a very radical decision. It has stopped funding UNESCO. The problem was there for a long period of time. It was a culmination of so many complicated international events that had taken place. So if you talk about UNESCO, what is UNESCO? These are all kindergarten things. What is the acronym for UNESCO? Yes, when you are answering, I know. Right. So, education, science and culture. Can all of them go together? Can science and culture go together? That is the reason why UNESCO is going to be a failure, the name itself. So, right? Education, science we can understand, but culture? That is where the problem had come up. For all these multilateral institutions, United States of America is the major contributor of money. All these institutions survive because of the financial assistance provided by United States of America. What happened? When this Israel had come into existence, 1948, Israel was artificially created by Allied powers to recognize the contribution of a Jewish population in the Second World War. This Israel was created in the midst of Arab countries, Muslim countries. Obviously, the creation of Israel itself, has, is going to result in major problems. And another major issue here is that Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a holy city for three important religions. Jewish religion, the most ancient of them all, then Islam and Christianity. And it went into the hands of Israel. And then from then onwards, Israel went on aggression. It fought so many wars. In 1966, all these Arab countries, they had come together and declared war on Israel. And obviously, you know what the outcome. Israel defeated all these Arab countries. And it occupied Golan Heights and so many other regions from neighboring countries. And of course, the Palestine problem is also there. So, since Israel, had come into existence, Israel had a true friend in the form of United States of America. When Donald Trump says that you can have a true friend in White House for India, take it only lightly. It is only to please India. When he says that Narendra Modi is the father of nation, to please Narendra Modi, because he wanted a trade agreement that would benefit America. Trade agreement that would benefit America. But Modi being Modi, he said that no, you can call me grandfather of India also, I don't mind, but I will not compromise with the trade agreement. Okay? Because Trump wanted more concession for his industry. India has said that no way we can give. That is the reason why trade agreement, they could not reach any trade agreement also. So whereas Israel, he always influenced American politics. This Jewish population in America, half of the presidents of America had, this background only. So obviously America always, always took the side of Israel in these Israeli-Arab wars. And this UNESCO had become the battleground. Why? Because in UNESCO you have countries, mostly from third world countries, and NAM and all these countries are part of this. And what they have done is that they have deliberately created hurdles, especially when it comes to culture. Why? Because Israel has so many cultural monuments, and which are declared in United Nations. This UNESCO recognizes them as World Heritage Sites. What Israel has done is that it has deliberately ensured that those cultural monuments related to Islam and for that matter a little bit of Christianity, they were not given importance. And this was opposed by these Arab countries and other NAM countries at that point of time. So that is the reason why what United States of America has done. USA had come out of UNESCO first. They had come out of UNESCO in 1984 itself. USA has said that we are coming out of UNESCO. We are stopping funding for UNESCO. Why? Because the same reason. Israel has been unfairly targeted by the member countries of UNESCO. Anti-Israeli bias. And they stopped funding. Later again they joined UNESCO. But again in 2017, the same problem had come up. In 2017. The same problem is related to recognition of these ancient monuments. Israel has deliberately hurt the sentiments of Muslims, and obviously this has angered these Arab countries and other countries, and they said that this was wrong on the part of UNESCO. Has passed a resolution saying that what Israel has done was wrong, and again America got angry. America has asked UNESCO, who are you to decide what Israel is doing, good or bad? I will decide. And America has said that since UNESCO has adopted anti-Israeli bias, they are coming out of UNESCO. America stopped funding. America, in fact, America never really provided the financial assistance to Israel, running into millions of dollars. Sorry, never really provided financial funding to UNESCO, running into millions of dollars. That is the reason why UNESCO had become a defunct institution at this point of time. Because no organization can survive without finances. Rest of the countries in the world, they can talk, they cannot provide money. That is where the problem is. As I said, it had become major problem in 2017. That's the reason why I gave it in 2018. And UPSC was 1 year late. They gave it this year. Next, again as I said, you have to observe what is going on. International relationship are all about what is going on in the world. If you are spending every day 5 minutes of your precious time in reading in an international page in newspapers, that is more than enough. He will answer all the questions. Like he said, every Tuesday you can read what Raja Mohan is writing. That is also more than enough. 52 weeks, 52 pages. That is more than enough for your IR. Next, let us come to the section B part. On what grounds a people's representative can be disqualified under RPA 1951? Also mention the remedies available to such persons against his disallowance. How a member of parliament or a member of legislative assembly can be disqualified under Representation of People's Act 1951. If he is convicted by any court for a period of 2 or more years, he is automatically disqualified for a period of 6 years along with the period of punishment. Next, what are the other grounds? If he commits any electoral malpractices as we discussed in our classes, in 1975, Allahabad High Court disqualified Indira Gandhi for committing electoral malpractices. Third ground, if he does not submit his election expenses on time to Election Commission, or if he submits false accounts. At present, if you look at Sunny Deol, member of parliament, he is facing disqualification because of these charges. Sunny Deol. Yes? Yes or no? Are you reading newspapers? Just because he is from Punjab, you cannot ignore. You know? Okay. You have to read also. So this is next. What are the other grounds? If he is holding any government contracts, there should be clear-cut separation of powers between legislature and executive. As a member of parliament, you should not have any government contracts. You should not be taking any government works. If you are doing that, you can be disqualified. Next, if he is a director of a company wherein government has around 25% stake, you cannot be a director of any company wherein the government has around 25% stake. Then also you can be disqualified. Next, if the person is dismissed from the government service for corruption or any other related offence. If you are not eligible for government service, you cannot be member of a parliament or MLA also. Next, if he is convicted for any social offences like untouchability or any other crimes, then also he can be disqualified. Who will take the decision related to disqualification? It is the president of the country takes decision on the basis of the recommendations of election commission. And what is the remedy available? All the decisions can be challenged in a court of law. The decisions can be challenged in a court of law. Next, Parliament's power to amend the Constitution is a limited power and it cannot be enlarged into absolute power. In the light of the statement, explain whether Parliament under Article 368 can destroy the basic structure of the Constitution by expanding its amending power. The question itself provides answer also. UPSC is so good that in most of the questions you can also find the answer also. So, why this question had come up? This question had come up during the phase of what we call confrontation between legislature and judiciary. You have to talk about the little bit about the history. How do you start your answer? As we said in the previous questions also, in India, Constitution is supreme as well as sovereign. The organs of the state, legislature, executive and judiciary, derive their power from Constitution. Derive their power from Constitution. But our constitutional forefathers have provided opportunities for our members of parliament to amend the Constitution itself. To amend the Constitution itself. And what they have said that while amending the Constitution, they have given powers to judiciary also. Judiciary can declare any law made by parliament ultra vires if it restricts the fundamental rights of citizens under Article 13. It created conflict between executive and legislature on one side and judiciary on the other side. So initially, this Congress in the first amendment to the Constitution itself created the conflict. It added 9th schedule to the Constitution, wherein the laws which are part of the 9th schedule cannot be touched by judiciary. They are beyond judicial review. But during this period, as we discussed, judiciary was what is called passive judiciary. Then, Supreme Court had come out with the judgment in the Golaknath case, wherein Supreme Court has said that in case of a conflict between FRs and DPSPs, FRs should be given precedence over DPSPs. Indira Gandhi government reacted. It reacted by amending the Constitution, 24th Amendment to the Constitution. As part of the 24th Amendment, Indira Gandhi amended Article 368 itself. The amendment process was completely amended. Amendment to amendment to amendment. Okay. So, as part of this, Parliament has absolute power to amend any part of the Constitution, including fundamental rights. That is when Supreme Court, as we always say, comes out with landmark judgments. It had come out with landmark judgment in the case 1 and the Bharti case, wherein Supreme Court tried to strike a balance between the powers of legislature and judiciary. It has accepted the power of legislature to amend any part of the Constitution, including fundamental rights. But at the same time, Supreme Court ruled that they cannot amend the basic structure of the Constitution. So, someone innocently asked Supreme Court, what is basic structure? They smiled and said no comments. Okay. Okay. So, the basic structure is left undefined deliberately by Supreme Court. That is what the question talks about. In the light of the statement explained whether the Parliament under Article 33 can destroy the basic structure of the Constitution. They cannot destroy the basic structure of the Constitution. Give the example here. One of the important aspects of basic structure of the Constitution is independence of judiciary and judicial review. That is the reason why Supreme Court has struck down NJAC bill also, saying that NJAC violates the basic structure of the Constitution. There are attempts made by the Parliament from time to time to restrict the fundamental rights of the citizens, to alter the basic structure of the Constitution. That is where judiciary had come to the rescue of the citizens. You have to write all these things. Again, as I said, it is not a difficult question. Next, the reservation of seats for women in the institution of local self-governments has had a limited impact on the patriarchal character of Indian political process. Again, it seems that the question is directly taken from our class notes. That is the problem with the IPR regime in India. Very, very weak. Anyone can copy. Copying is our birthright. Okay. So that is what we say. Why 33% reservations for women has not been successful? Why it has not been successful? As we have said, it is because of the patriarchal character of our Indian societies, male-dominated societies. That is the reason why we said that these panchayats in India, they are called Pati panchayats. They are ruled by men in a proxy. Women are there only for the positions. Otherwise, the real power was in the hands of men only. And this arrangement was taken to the highest level in Bihar when Lalu Prasad Yadav has made his wife chief minister also. From panchayat to the state government, everything is the same. Patriarchal character. And people say that it is women empowerment when Rabri Devi had become the chief minister of Bihar also. But the question says that that is the reason why in some of the states like Bihar, they have increased the reservation from 33 to 50% also. Why? Because when there is no real power in the hands of women, make them some happy by giving more representation. Tomorrow they will say that 150% reservations are in local self-governments. As long as there is no power, that is where the problem is. One of the important objectives of this 73rd Amendment is social justice. Empowerment of women, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. This has not been achieved because of the feudal and patriarchal character of our Indian societies, male-dominated societies. But this is only one side of the story. But in the recent times, you can see there is change. Women definitely started participating more actively in functioning of panchayat bodies. And we have given some recommendations also. What are the recommendations to change the character of local self-governments? What we have said, the experiment in the states like Kerala and Andhra Pradesh should be replicated in rest of the country. In these states of Kerala and Andhra Pradesh, the members from self-help groups are encouraged to contest elections to local bodies. When they are elected unanimously to the local bodies, the state governments will incentivize those panchayats by giving them cash support. They are given 1 crore rupees of special grants to those panchayat bodies which elect members of self-help groups. That is one of the solutions. Next solution, what we have said is, what can be done? What are the other solutions we have given in the class? What are the other solutions? At the local level, in order to ensure active participation of women, there should be Mahila Sabhas. That is what happens if you don't read. Mahila Sabhas. Right? Women in the village are not able to come out of their houses and actively participate in the meetings of Gram Sabhas because of the feudal patriarchal nature of our societies, male dominated societies which do not allow women to come out and work also. That is the reason why let the women of the village come together, hold a meeting and have these Gram Sabhas. Whatever the decisions taken by the Gram Sabhas should be included in the decisions of the Gram, whatever the decisions taken by Mahila Sabhas should become part of the decisions of Gram Sabhas. Another solution we have given. What are the other solutions? What are the other solutions? As I keep on saying, I always said that read our class notes at least 1 trillion times. Not even a single question will be asked beyond our class notes, as I keep on saying everything all the time. They will never ask anything. If you want to read something else, you can read it for your own psychological satisfaction. What is the other solution we have given? Yes, gender budgeting we talked about. Okay, fine. Gender budgeting. Next. That is what is gender budgeting. If you repeat the same point 2-3 times, it will not become 3 points in the answer. Okay, next. Okay, you can give him the benefit of doubt because he has not heard what she is saying. Okay, next. And the solution, very important one which we talked about. Disbursal of funds to the Gram Panchayat should be done by the concerned officer only when he is satisfied that the head of the Panchayat is fully informed about the programs that are being implemented. Awareness is the first step for empowerment, creating awareness. This is what we have said. Please remember, I said that these things will not be there in the textbooks, whatever we have given. And again, also I have taken these things only from government reports only. Very, very important. And what are the other solutions that we have provided? Apart from gender budgeting and these other things. What else? What else do you think that can be done? Pardon? Cash transfers. No. We must ensure safety and security of women. This is the first thing that you have to do. I remember when we discussed that thing in the class also, all the programs related to women empowerment would become useless unless we ensure safety and security of women, especially in public life. Very important. So you can write about all the things, just go through the notes and you will find out all these points which you have to write. Next, Attorney General is the chief legal advisor and lawyer of the Government of India. Discuss. 15 marks. The question, answer is there in the question itself. He is the chief legal advisor and lawyer of Government of India. Some of you will repeat the same term. He is the chief legal advisor as well as lawyer. Second statement, he is the lawyer as well as chief legal advisor. So, you cannot be so creative in your answers. So what you have to write for this kind of questions? You have to write, you have to give the examples wherein Attorney General had played a very important role. First, to talk about the constitutional position. Why do we require Attorney General in the first place? Why? Because the government deals with so many legal issues in terms of formulating laws, rules and regulations. As part of delegated legislation, it is the executive that makes laws, rules and regulations on behalf of legislature. As part of DL, delegated legislation, it is the executive that makes laws, rules and regulations on behalf of legislature. And who make them? It is the bureaucracy, permanent executive, who frames these laws, rules and regulations. But the problem is that bureaucracy does not have any experience in law. They have experience in administration but not in law. That is the reason why government requires a legal advisor. That is the reason why we require Attorney General. You start with the why aspect. Second reason why you require Attorney General. In maximum number of cases that are being fought in Supreme Court and High Courts, the major litigant is the government. In maximum number of cases that are being fought in the Supreme Court and High Courts, the major litigant is the government. So government requires an effective voice in Supreme Courts and High Courts to give its opinion in front of the judges. That is the reason why we require Attorney General. That is the reason why, according to the Constitution, Attorney General can demand audience in any of the courts in India, whether it is Supreme Court or in any of the High Court. He has the right to audience. He can demand from the judges that he should be heard in any of the courts, because he is the lawyer who represents the government in these institutions. That is the reason why Attorney General is also allowed to attend the meetings of Parliament, without participating, without voting on the floor of the House, because he can provide. So after writing all these things, then you have to give the examples in Indian administration. If you remember, this is what we said in the class. When there was a conflict between the first president and the prime minister regarding the powers of a president in a parliamentary democracy, Rajendra Prasad had asked the Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, what are the powers of the president in a parliamentary democracy? His question is, since the President of India is elected, unlike the British Queen, whose position is hereditary in nature, the President of India enjoys more discretionary powers than the British Queen. And he had sent this query to the cabinet, asking the cabinet to clarify the position of the President. That is when the cabinet met and it sought the opinion of Attorney General. Attorney General has replied that the President of India, even though he is elected, since India is a republic, he is elected, otherwise President of India enjoys the same kind of powers as that of the Queen of England. That is where Attorney General becomes. And then in recent times, in the last 10-15 years, what we have witnessed is controversies related to Attorney General. In 10-15 years, Supreme Court has expressed serious displeasure over the functioning of Attorney General in this 2G spectrum and other corruption cases, because the Attorney General had come out with false arguments. Supreme Court had expressed serious reservations over the functioning of Attorney General, and in some cases, Attorney General cases were filed against Attorney General, for corruption also, which resulted in the resignation of Attorney General also. And in the present government also, Attorney General had to resign because the government felt that he was not able to defend the government on the floor of the House properly. You have to talk about all these instances. Why? Because at the end of the day, he is the voice of the government in all these judicial institutions. And that is where, and now as you can see, most of the legislations nowadays are facing judicial scrutiny because the failure of Attorney General to provide right kind of suggestions, legal suggestions to the Cabinet or Council of Ministers. For example, the previous Attorney General, in case of this Aadhaar, had given wrong suggestions to the government, which resulted in the defeat of the government on the floor of the in Supreme Court. Government does not accept that, but Supreme Court has said that Aadhaar cannot be made compulsory because it violates the right to privacy, which is a fundamental right. That is where the previous Attorney General has failed to give proper opinion to the government. And that is the reason why Attorney General becomes, in the 2G spectrum, coal spectrum, in all other cases, the government of the day had to face defeat on the floor of the House because of the wrong advice given by Attorney General. And this is happening because politicization of the office of Attorney General. Attorney General is what we call a spoils system. The ruling political party will appoint their favorite lawyer as Attorney General. And Attorney General will be assisted by Solicitor General and other lawyers also. You have to write about all these things. Again, as I keep on saying, you need a very good in-depth knowledge of real polity right from 1950s till now. Because you don't know what kind of questions are asked. You have to prepare for all those questions with examples from polity. Next, individual parliamentarians' role as the national lawmaker is on a decline, which in turn has adversely impacted the quality of debates and their outcomes. Discuss. I remember this is what we discussed as part of declining standards of our parliament. Why we are witnessing declining standards of our parliament? Why? Because individual parliamentarians' role is coming down drastically. What are the reasons why individual parliamentarians' role is coming down drastically? What did we say? Why? That means you don't remember. Okay. What is the reason why? Okay. I know we'll come to those things later, but specific. Why? Because the whip system. Members of Parliament are not allowed to speak their mind on the floor of the House. Second, anti-defection law. Third, executive dominating legislature, using its majority on the floor of the House, to get bill passed. Four, all the bills are passed without any discussion on the floor of the House. Bills are passed without any discussion. We said that, I remember this is what again we discussed in the class also. When people say that, when the government boasts that it is the most productive session of a parliament wherein around 30 bills were passed, the other side of it is that it also shows executive dictatorship. All these bills were passed without any discussion on the floor of the House. Next, government resorting to guillotine to pass budgetary proposals. Guillotine. All the budgetary proposals are passed without any discussion on the floor of the House. Next, the parliamentary committee system has failed to rise above selfish political interests. Parliamentary committee system has failed. Next important thing, if you remember, what is it? Why individuals' contribution is coming down drastically? We discussed it in our class extensively. Private member bills. Parliament is supposed to make laws, rules, and regulations. And we are continuing with a British legacy, wherein during the British times, the Governor General or Viceroy had absolute veto powers over private member bills. After independence, we continued with the same, wherein we have given the President of India absolute veto powers over private member bills. What is the most important function of members of parliament, members of legislature? To frame laws, rules and regulations. This has been taken away from them. Next, delegated legislation. This is what we say, delegated legislation is a necessary evil. It has reduced the contribution of individual members. Delegated legislation. Next, you can talk about whatever you have said. Politicization of crime and criminalization of politics. The quality of our legislature has come down drastically. The quality of members of parliament had come down drastically due to politicization of crime. And next, emergence of charismatic leadership. Emergence of charismatic leadership, especially from 1970s onwards, which resulted in autocratic functioning of political parties. Did we discuss all these things in the class? Yes. Did you forget all these things? Yes. One more yes. Yes. Okay. So that is what. And you know what are the solutions? We talked about all the solutions also. What should be done? What we have said? If you remember, what did we say? Political parties should be allowed to issue whip only in case of no confidence motion and in case of voting on budget. Only those two instances they should be allowed to issue whip. Otherwise, in case of voting on ordinary bills, they should not be allowed to issue whips. Next, we said that private member bills, the absolute veto powers of the president should be taken away to encourage individual members of parliament to come out with initiatives on new legislation. We have so many members of parliament who are very good professionals in their own fields, who are capable of coming out with new legislations, but they are not. Why? Because even if they are passed by both houses of legislature, there is no guarantee that it will be given assent by the president. I give the example in 1960s. When the private member introduced a bill regarding banning dowry, making dowry a crime. The Nehru government had persuaded the person to withdraw the bill. The government introduced it as a treasury bill so that it will not face any problems from the President of India. After that, we did not have any private members bills that have been introduced. The number of private member bills had come down drastically over a period of time. Members of parliament have failed to perform their basic function, that is legislation. And then we talked about all the safeguards related to delegated legislation. Then we said that guillotine should be removed from parliamentary procedures. And then we also said that there should be democratic functioning in the political parties by ending dynastic politics. Regular conduct of elections, secondary rung leadership, political parties should promote, and they must give more freedom to their members to express their opinions also. We gave the example of British parliamentary democracy, wherein ruling political party members defeat their government on the floor of the house more than the opposition in case of bills. Take the case of again the Brexit also. It is the ruling political party members who backstabbed the present Prime Minister of UK. They are the ones who defeated the confidence motion on the floor of the House. That is what in UK, Parliament, that is what we call a mature democracy. Parliament controls the executive. In India, executive controls Parliament, dominates Parliament. That is what you have to write for this question. Next, As I said, all these three questions will have the same answer. 16, 17 and 18. Again, all these three questions are a part of governance. In the context of neoliberal paradigm of development planning, multi-level planning is expected to make operations cost effective and remove implementation blockages. Discuss. So, what we are saying, from 1950s to 1990s, India opted for a centralized planning process. Centralized planning process, wherein what are the features of the centralized planning process? A top-down approach to implementation, bureaucracy-centric development, no legal accountability of administration towards the people in terms of implementation of schemes, then high levels of secrecy in implementation, absolutely no scope for citizen participation in development process, and bureaucracy was responsible for formulation, implementation and evaluation also. They would formulate the schemes, they will formulate the programs and projects, they take the responsibility for implementation, they would also evaluate the performance. That is what we have said, which resulted in the failure of development administration. The government was spending thousands and lakhs of crores of rupees on developmental welfare schemes. It did not result in any tangible outcomes. The country remained poor, underdeveloped, backward, illiterate and so on and so forth. That is when, after 1991, we have opted for what is called multi-level planning. After 1991, we have opted for multi-level planning. What is this multi-level planning? As part of multi-level planning, at the central level, in place of imperative planning, we have opted for indicative planning. In place of imperative regulatory planning, we have opted for indicative planning. And later, we completely abandoned 5-year plans, because as we mentioned, in this age of globalization and levelization, wherein the changes are taking place on a daily basis, this long-term planning has become anomaly. That is the reason why we have abandoned 5-year plans. And we also have disbanded planning commission and replaced it with the Niti Aayog by taking away all the financial powers of the planning commission. At the state level, you have state planning boards which are responsible for planning at the state level. And at the local level, at the district level, you have DPCs, district planning committees, as part of 73rd and 74th amendments. And below that, you have blocks or mandals. And below that, you have panchayats. And this is what we said, planning from below or decentralized planning. It starts from panchayat, Gram Sabha, wherein the elders of the village meet and formulate the plans for their own development. From then, it will be going to mandals or blocks. From there, it will be going to the districts. From there, it will be going to the state governments. Planning from below, multi-level planning. At each and every level, planning will be done. So the question says, this multi-level planning is expected to make operations cost effective and remove many implementation blockages. So how it makes operations cost effective and remove implementation blockages? For example, if the planning is done at the lowest level, what is the idea behind multi-level planning? People at the lowest level, at the village level, they know their problems better and they know the solutions also better. Administration does not require any knowledge, technical knowledge. What is required is only empathy. What is needed for a successful administrator? That is what we study in ethics. It requires only empathy. Those who are feeling, those who are suffering at the lowest level, if give them opportunity, they come out with beautiful solutions to their problems. That is the reason why we said that as an example of what is called direct democracy, we said that Gram Sabha should be the basic unit of administration, wherein the villages must come together and decide how to spend their monies. That is what Mahatma Gandhi's dream also, transforming our villages into self-sufficient independent republics. This is possible with multi-level planning. It will help in reducing the cost. Why? Because they can come out with accurate estimates of expenditure and outcomes. On the other hand, you are sitting in Delhi and you are planning, you are planning for a village in Assam. Do you know what are the problems? Obviously, you don't know. That is the reason why centralized planning has failed, because there is huge amount of mismatch between the plans formulated at the top and the needs of the people at the bottom, resulting in wastage of resources, duplication of work and corruption and everything. Now, if people formulate the plans themselves, they can also take responsibility for their implementation as well as evaluation. That is what we call stakeholder participation. And that is why we said as part of governance reforms, three important things. First one is citizen charters. Second one is multi-actor paradigm in implementation. Multi-actor paradigm. As part of evaluation, social audits. This is the essence of what we call multi-level planning. Essence of multi-level planning. Policy formulation, implementation and evaluation. This is what we say shift from bureaucracy-centric development to citizen-centric development. All these things you have to write. Unfortunately, you have to write the same thing for the next question also. Let us see the next question. The need for cooperation among various service sectors has been an inherent component of development discourse. Partnership bridges the gap among the sectors. It also sets in motion the culture of collaboration and team spirit. In the light of statement above, examine India's development process. So, this is what we say as part of liberalization and globalization. The change that has taken place, critical change, is we have moved away from state-centric development, state-dominated development to citizen-centric development. Multiple actors involved in development process. Please remember, all these things require good knowledge of technical aspects of public administration. That is the reason why this year, those who have good knowledge of public administration can be expected to score better in polity governance paper. So, only those who have good knowledge of public administration. Not everyone who takes public administration does not mean that. Okay. You know whom I am referring to. Right? So, this is what we say. In the age of liberalization, globalization and democratic decentralization, we talk about multi-actor paradigm. And this is also what is called new public governance approach, which is the latest development in public administration. New public governance approach. This is the question about this. So many institutions are involved in the development process. What are the institutions? Look at it. Niti Aayog, various central ministries and departments. At the state level, state ministries and departments. Then at the district level, you have DPCs, district planning committees. Then at the lowest level, you have Gram Sabhas. Then you have all pervasive bureaucracy, right from the top to the bottom, bureaucracy. That means the administrators. Then you have NGOs, civil society organizations, pressure groups, self-help groups, media, community-based organizations, private sector, multinational companies, public-private partnerships. All of them are involved in a development process. And in these NGOs also you have, environmental, green NGOs, which are a major component of development administration at this point of time. When so many of them are involved in development, as the question says, you need to bridge the gap between different sectors. The basic problem here is that all the institutions here we have talked about have their own vested interests. All of them have their own selfish vested interests, which results in conflict between all of them. For example, private sector is interested in profits. NGOs are interested in protecting environment. Pressure groups are interested in their own demands and needs. And bureaucracy has its own interest. And then central government, they have their own specific interest. Every program should have the name of Prime Minister, so that in the next elections, they can get themselves elected again. State governments have their own interests. So everyone has their own selfish vested interest. That is when development becomes much more complicated. This was not a problem that was faced by development administration in India before 1991, because the entire development administration was monopolized by state. There was no scope for any of these institutions. Now, under these circumstances, how to ensure development? That is what we say new public governance approach. So what is the role of the state here? The role of the state here is to reconcile conflicting interests of various institutions involved. You must reconcile conflicting interests. You have to take into consideration the interests of NGOs, civil society organizations, private sector, bureaucracy, pressure groups. You have to reconcile all those conflicting interests. And second, you have to find common ground. The lowest common denominator you have to find among all these powerful vested interests. Third, you must ensure collaboration, cooperation, coordination among all these groups. Fourth, you must ensure that all of them will give importance to outcomes from the perspective of citizens. They give importance to outcomes from the perspective of citizens. Ultimately, that is what we say, the objective of development administration is citizen empowerment. This is what Amartya Sen talks about, empowering the citizens. That is what you have to write for this question. Next, performance of various welfare schemes that are implemented for vulnerable sections is not so effective due to the absence of their awareness and active involvement of all stages of policy process. Again, the statement was directly picked up from our class notes. Yes? Yes or no? Yes. Why do you have to feel shy? Don't worry, next year also they will pick up one more statement. We have a good number of statements in our class notes, which is enough for UPSC to conduct examination till 5050. So you don't have to worry. So, already you are thinking, if they have given all the statements from class notes this year, what will they do next year? Don't worry, our class note has some sufficient statements. You don't have to worry. Only thing is that you have to read, remember, recollect and reproduce in the exam in the examination. So what are they saying? Why development administration in India is a failure? We always say that two important reasons. One is lack of awareness among the stakeholders. That is what we kept on repeating in the class hundreds of times, if not hundreds, at least trillion times, right? So lack of awareness. We gave the example which you have to write in the examination also. Average Indian village in India is expected to receive benefits of 350 schemes of central and state governments. Not one or two, 350 schemes of central and state governments. How many of them do they know? That is where the failure lies of development administration in India. Lack of awareness among the stakeholders, the beneficiaries. Second, this lack of awareness, what is happening? It is preventing them from participating either in their formulation or implementation or evaluation. Either in their formulation or implementation or their evaluation. This is what we always say. The first important stage in citizen empowerment is creating awareness among the citizens about their rights. Democracy can be successful only when citizens have a complete information about their rights. Development administration can be successful again only when there is a awareness among the citizens. And what is the reason why the government does not create awareness? Then you talk about the reasons. Why? Neither political executive nor bureaucracy is interested in creating awareness. As if you remember, as you studied in ethics paper, we always used to make a very famous statement in ethics paper. We can understand if children are afraid of darkness, the problem comes up when grown-up people are afraid of light. The same problem political executive and bureaucracy faces in India. They don't want any kind of transparency in implementation of these schemes because it is the secrecy that allows them to indulge in corruption, in misuse, misallocation of resources. As I said, when they are implementing 350 schemes, on the other hand, I remember this is what we said in the class also. Central government is implementing not one or two, 2,000 schemes, central sector as well as centrally sponsored schemes. This is only about central government. How many of them are implemented really at the ground level? Anybody's guess. Anybody's guess. Apart from this, add the schemes of state governments also. Where is the money going? Every year in the budget, huge amounts of monies are allocated for these schemes in the name of welfare. Where is the money going? That is where the problem is. Why? Because, as we have said, both the political executive and bureaucracy. Political executive responsible for policy formulation, bureaucracy for implementation. Both of them have vested interest in functioning in a highly secretive, unaccountable manner, which helps them to indulge in massive levels of corruption. That is where you can give the example again. Rajiv Gandhi, when he was the Prime Minister in 1987, he made the statement that out of every 100 rupees spent by the government, only 16 rupees reaches the poor people. Remaining 84 goes into the hands of corrupt bureaucrats and politicians or in administrative expenditure. Give the example of food security. Every year, this year also in the budget, the government has allocated 2,20,000 crores. Where is it going? Nobody knows. Because as a person from poorest village in say Jharkhand or Uttar Pradesh or Bihar or Bengal, do you know how the money is being spent? Where it is being spent? You don't know anything. Lack of awareness. Why? Because as we have said, we are continuing with colonial structures, wherein the Britishers deliberately made sure that there is absolutely no scope for citizen participation in governance. Because British administration was highly exploitative in nature, obviously they did not want any citizen participation. After independence also, in development administration also we are following colonial structures. That resulted in the failure of development administration. What is the solution? As we have said, the solution is creating awareness among the citizens first of all. What are solutions that we have to say? What are the solutions? Again, what are the things that we have discussed in the class? You have to write all of them. First one is creating awareness among the citizens about all these schemes. Creating awareness. Second, ensuring stakeholder participation. Stakeholder participation at all the stages of public policy. Either stakeholder participation in terms of formulation of policies through citizen charters. Their participation in implementation through multi-actor paradigm. Their participation in policy evaluation through social audit committees. This is possible only when RTI, section 4 of RTI is implemented. This is possible only when there are effective grievance redressal mechanisms to find out corruption and punish the culprits. This is also possible only when we adopt technology, e-governance, to provide real-time up-to-date information to the beneficiaries. This is also possible only when we adopt outcome budgets. Outcome budgets. This is also possible only when we have a concurrent audit. This is possible only when we transform public-private partnerships into public-private people panchayat partnerships. 5P, people panchayat partnerships. This is also possible only when we empower local self-governments by implementing 73rd, 74th amendments in both letter and spirit. All these things you have to write as a solution. Next, the long sustained image of India as a leader of the oppressed and marginalized nations has disappeared on account of its newfound role in the emerging global order. So this is what we always made fun of in our class. Nehruvian model. Nehru was the leader of NAM, and this NAM is nothing but group of beggar countries. Nehru was made the leader of NAM. Don't write all these things in the examination. Okay. Nehru was made the leader of NAM because he was a better qualified beggar, big beggar among other nations, because he had the experience of begging from everyone, both America and Russia also. That is what NAM. What is NAM? Non-aligned. Beggars must have universal rights. They should not restrict their begging either from America or Russia. At that point of time, we had bipolar world. Developing countries had come together and they said that they would retain their independence in their foreign policy, and they created an institution called NAM. And most of these NAM countries are what you call the third world countries, which got independence from their colonial masters, which are extremely poor. India was the leader of these poor countries. This was till 1990s. And after what happened? After that, we opted for liberalization, privatization, globalization. Thanks to this LPG, India has come out of this nations. Right now, India is part of what is called developing world. If you go by Donald Trump, India is not even part of developing world also. Why? Because with fifth highest or sixth highest GDP in the world, Trump says that China and India cannot climb to be the status of developing nations in WTO also. Even before we realized we became developed also. Okay. So that is what happened. Okay. We did not even realize this till Trump blown the trumpet. Okay. That is what happened. And that is where the problem had come up for India. Why? Because earlier, if you look at the global geopolitics between 1950s and 1990s, it was very much clear: developed countries and developing poor countries, underdeveloped countries. We call them as UDCs, underdeveloped countries. So India, being the natural leader of this underdeveloping countries, always fought with the developed world for its rights. Now what happened in recent times? These underdeveloped countries remained the same. Sub-Saharan African countries, Latin American countries. In between, one more layer had come up in the global geopolitics called developing countries. We call them as part of BRICS countries. India is part of this developing world, and then we have about that the developed countries. We have developed countries about that. Now what happened here is that India at present is facing this policy dilemma. Should it be part of this developing world and thinking about its own interests? Should it continue to be the leader of this beggar group and fight for the rights of beggars? That is what the question is about. India is no longer part of UDCs, and we are facing these kind of dilemmas in our foreign policy, especially in WTO. Why? Because all these underdeveloped countries are strongly opposing the subsidies given by India on agriculture. What they are saying is that the subsidies given by India on agriculture and other commodities is resulting in a increase in prices of food grains. It is resulting in food inflation. These countries are suffering problems related to poverty and hunger because of the policies of India. It is a new situation which we have faced in WTO. We can understand when the developed world come and question us. That is quite natural. But we are facing opposition from these underdeveloped countries. These Latin American countries, Sub-Saharan African countries, they are saying that the kind of subsidies you are giving to your farmers, especially in rice, wheat, sugar, and all these things, it is only resulting in a huge amount of food inflation. Especially between 2002 and 2012, the world has seen huge amount of increase in prices of food grains. And this was when WTO negotiations also had turned bitter between the developing countries and underdeveloped countries and developing countries like India. Countries like India and China, they wanted to protect the subsidies they are giving to their own people, especially India. India has said that there is absolutely no compromise in relation to the subsidies given to its farmers. We say that it is needed for our food security. These underdeveloped countries are saying that if you are doing that, it is resulting in inflation. Because India does not allow export of food surplus. We are producing, say, X amount of food grains, say 180 million tons. The consumption needs are only 130 million tons. If remaining 50 million tons, if we can export to other countries, it will bring down food prices, right, at the global level. But India is not doing that. We are keeping the extra 50 million tons also with us. We impose huge amount of restrictions on food exports, and because of which there is huge amount of increase in food inflation. And these developing countries, these underdeveloped countries, they have formed a bloc among themselves and strongly opposed India in this global fora. We can understand America criticizing India, but we face criticism from these countries. That is what the question is about. Again, for these kind of questions, you need in-depth knowledge of international relations, how the global order has changed. So now India is aspiring to be a global power, but is facing challenges from other countries. So we are neither here nor there. That is the problem. If we are underdeveloped country, we can happily get all the subsidies. Whether it is sustainable development, whether it is environmental protection, whether it is reducing carbon emissions. America is saying that why this subsidies should be given to India and China. Why? Because they are developed countries. And underdeveloped countries are saying that India is contributing maximum to environmental pollution. India is one of the countries which are on the top of polluting the environment. The first is China, then United States of America, then India. And on the other hand, India is also demanding subsidies from the developed world. And these underdeveloped countries are protesting it. You are contributing maximum to the pollution and you are also demanding subsidies for polluting. That is where the problem. Everywhere in India, this is what the transitional blues, when the country is in the process of transition from a poor country to a developed one. That is where the problem is. Of course, these are all good challenges. India can always come out of it and it can become a economic superpower in the future. That is what you have to write. That is the reason why in India still we can see so many politicians fondly recalling NAM days. Most of these ancient politicians, like communist parties, left parties, they are called left parties because they are left out. Okay. So similarly, in Congress party also, Congress party recalls fondly those days when Congress party was in power and India was poor. Congress party fondly remembers the contribution of Jawaharlal Nehru, the big beggar. That is the reason why Congress party says that NAM is extremely relevant also nowadays. NAM is not relevant at all. We are not part of NAM. We are part of BRICS. That is what we don't realize. That is where Narendra Modi's foreign policy. He has given completely new direction to foreign policy. He is pursuing aggressive foreign policies with self-interest in mind. And he is not afraid of using the might of India in negotiations with other countries, bilateral as well as multilateral negotiations. And we are not unnecessarily moral or ethical. When we were poor, nobody came to our rescue. When we are developing, why should we think about other countries in the world? Kautilya, who talks about self-interest as the cornerstone of foreign policy. Next, what introduces friction into the ties between India and the United States is that Washington is still unable to find for India a position in its global strategy which would satisfy India's national self-esteem and ambitions. Same question. Washington, they don't know how to deal with India as an equal partner in development or as a master-servant relationship, in a donor-beggar relationship, or as a threat to United States of America, as a rival. They don't know how to deal with India. What are the issues that we are talking about here? That is the reason why Donald Trump, one day he says that, he is India's closest friend in White House. Next day he says that I will mediate in India-Pakistan Kashmir issue. Third day he says that Imran Khan is a fool. Fourth day he says that Gandhi is not father of nation. So they don't know how to deal with India. So they don't know how to deal with India. America simply don't know. Why? Because Washington is unable to find for India a position in its global strategy which would satisfy India's national self-esteem and ambitions. India wants to be recognized as a major power, both economic, political and everything else. Because after globalization, what we have done is that we have worked on our soft power also. Soft power. We have used our culture, people to influence the countries around the world. Our, India's NRIs. They are the ones, what happened here? If you look at again the changes in the policy of Narendra Modi, for almost 60 to 70 years, 60 years of our independence, we never wanted to recognize the contributions of our NIRs or PAOs. Why? Because we always treated them as the citizens of those countries. We never thought that they could be used as assets, to improve our image in those countries. Suddenly, thanks to this service sector revolution, especially in the developed world, India's dominance can be seen in their service sector. In America, maximum number of doctors are from India. Maximum number of venture capitalists are from India. The stock market, New York Stock Exchange, is dominated by Indian investment bankers. So obviously, we are using them. Suddenly, countries like UK, America and other developed countries have recognized India's influence, both internally as well as externally, with the help of their expatriate population. Now they don't know how to deal with India. If you go by the economic indicators in terms of per capita income, in terms of education, health, infrastructure, industrialization, India can definitely be considered a poor country. Why? Because in terms of PCA, our per capita income is only $1,800. Per capita income of America and UK, there is no comparison also. Even 10 Chandrayans are not enough to reach those places. So obviously, you have to treat India as a poor country. But in terms of the influence exercised by India, being the 5th largest economy in the world, being the huge market for the products of these Western multinational companies, huge market for the products, being the supplier of service sector for all these countries. Service sector professionals, that is what Bill Gates would always say. He said that had there not been any IITs, there would not have been any Microsoft also. So that is what, so they don't know how to deal with India. India is, in the recent times, as we have said, we have openly expressed our ambitions to become a global power. One of the important things that we have done is, we have openly made our ambitions clear that we want to be member of Security Council permanent, Security Council permanent member of Security Council. This is what we have said. We openly said that we always have all the necessary qualities, conditions for us to be United Nations Security Council permanent member. And they don't know how to deal with this kind of ambitions. Next thing we have said is that in these WTO and other negotiations, India stalled single-handedly. 3 rounds of almost were stalled only because of India, related to food subsidies and agriculture. They could not proceed only because of India. India has said that no way, because in WTO, even if a single country opposes, you cannot have any rule and regulation. India single-handedly has said that we will not accept any legislation on the part of WTO which causes harm to our domestic interests. India is such a country right now wherein they cannot ignore India. At the same time, they are not willing to give they are not willing to accept India as a global power also. You cannot ignore them, but you don't want to recognize them also. That is where the problem is now. And the same is the problem with America. America does not know how to deal with India. As I said, WTO, that is what Donald Trump says. He says that India and China, they are getting huge amount of subsidies from WTO by being in the category of developing nations. He said that this is wrong. Why? Because they are not developing nations. In terms of per capita GDP, they are not. So they should not be given those subsidies. India says that we are, look at all our developmental indicators. Please come and visit our UP and Bihar. Okay. India says, thanks to our UP and Bihar, we can always talk about our poverty in glowing terms also. That is what we say. We are always a perennially developing country only. We need permanent subsidies. That is what we are saying. America says that no, we cannot. America says that let India and America have trade relationship on equal terms. And let India and America have other relationship in terms of environment, again on equal terms. In these global environmental summits, India always talks about common but differentiated responsibility. Whereas America says that equal responsibility. Both America should be cutting the carbon emissions in the same manner as that of India. India should not be given any kind of leeway. That is what America says. Why? Because India is also contributing hugely to carbon emissions. But India says that this is not accepted. So that is where America does not know how to deal with India. On one hand, they say that India should be treated as equal partner, but at the same time, America is not willing to accept India's demand for Security Council permanent member. America says that at present, America is willing to give permanent membership of Security Council only to Germany and Japan. America does not want anyone else at this point of time. And similarly, another dimension of this relationship is regarding IMF and WTO. The World Bank. World Bank is always controlled by America, IMF by Europe. And this World Bank and IMF always served the interests of developed countries. They served the interests of developed countries. India has said that this has to end. Monopoly of the developed world has to end. When they refused to implement reforms in World Bank and IMF, India has come out with an alternative solution. We said that we will have our own bank, BRICS bank. America don't know how to deal with this BRICS bank. Because IMF and World Bank are under the control of European countries and America. These BRIC banks can become a rival to this World Bank and IMF. That is where again America don't know how to deal with India. Now another dimension of the relationship here is America always wants to play a counterbalancing relationship with India and Pakistan. On the one hand, America wants to be supporting Pakistan, but at the same time, it wants to be seen as a neutral observer when it comes to Indo-Pakistan problems. And India says that this kind of a double game we do not accept. Either you are with us or you are against us. That is the reason why when Donald Trump and Narendra Modi meeting was taking place the other day, Indian journalists repeatedly asked Donald Trump about his opinion regarding what is happening in Pakistan and everything, Pakistan sponsored terrorism. Trump almost was literally trumped. Okay, he could not answer the question. That is where he does not know how to deal with, because he cannot openly side himself with India. Why? Because America requires the help of Pakistan. America requires the help of Pakistan in tackling Afghan problem, Taliban. So America cannot directly support India. then America will be alienating Pakistan. If America completely alienates Pakistan, Pakistan hates Pakistan, Pakistan can become a heaven for terrorists. Pakistan can become another Afghanistan. It can become another ISIS also. That is the reason why. Next problem is, America again does not know how to deal with this Indo-China cooperation. Another dimension. In WTO and Environment Summit and everything else, India and China are coming together and they are posing threat to America. That is what we study in international relations. Your enemy's enemy is your friend. So when America started this trade war with China, it is India which can benefit out of it. That is where America does not know how to deal with this again. America till now has played this double game. Now every country is playing double game with America. And they don't know how to, especially India. As I said, Narendra Modi, Gujarat is extremely cunning people. And for a change, his intelligence is helping India here. Otherwise, if you look at the previous prime ministers, the problem with all the previous prime ministers was they were idealistic in their foreign policies. That resulted in their failure. Narendra Modi, never idealistic, opportunistic. Always looking for opportunities. When they are not there, create opportunities for yourself also. That is the reason why he always says that let us discuss everything from a macro perspective, not only one particular thing. Trump says that let us discuss first trade, then we can discuss terrorism. Modi says that let us discuss both of them combined together. They don't know how to deal with it. That is what you have to write for these questions. Again, you require comprehensive knowledge of what is happening. So this is enough, I think, and as you could see, most of these things we have done in our classes. Yes? We have not done IR in our class, so obviously cannot. So otherwise, as I said, IR at best you will be reading for 2 days. It is? They are difficult. Yeah, they will be difficult if you don't know anything. Then everything will be difficult. Only last 2 questions. Why? That is what. And as I said, you have to be focusing on governance aspects, especially. If you can get, read latest developments in public administration also for governance. As I said, we discussed in the class new public governance approach. All the things are required. So that is it. Tomorrow at the same time we will discuss paper 3. We will discuss economy, internal security and disaster management. Science and technology, like you people, I also don't know. Okay. So we will discuss. And instead of science and technology, I will discuss social issues from paper 1. Right? Tomorrow we are meeting at the same time.